everybody. Lord Tremendous here. Got another book review here for you. This one is the last book of Starships and Apocalypse, Volume 2, Time and Terrors, a collection of short stories by Andrew P. McGregor. This one is called Builder of Bones. Like I said, it's the last one, number 1111. And this is a longer one. This is more of like a novella than an actual short story. But, I mean, it's 75 pages, so it's right on the cusp. So short story, novella, whatever you want to call it. I believe the author refers to it as a novella. But it's still science. Well, actually, no. It got me too. It is not science fiction. The last story in this book is fantasy, which doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me. It didn't. At first it kind of bothered me. It was like, why would you do that? That would be like having a science fiction book with well, something that's not science fiction in it, and it confused me why the author would put this in here, but I decided to ignore it. I decided to leave it alone. It is weird. I definitely wanted to make note of it, but this story doesn't belong in this book. I don't know why it was added. My guess, and this is just me completely guessing, was to fill it out, to add to the page count or something like that. But I don't understand it. But anyway, that's not going to affect, I wanted to point it out because it's not going to affect my overall rating of the book or anything like that, or my review. It's just, I wanted to point it out that it doesn't belong in this book. It doesn't fit the genre, and it's weird that it would be included. But yeah, other than that, it was still published on April 4th, 2021, and it's a longer one, so I got a lot to say, so let's get to it. So like I said, this is a fantasy story, and the main character's name is Kors Maris. And he's mostly referred to as Maris because I think it's hilarious because Kors is a kind of beer, which is cool because Maris is a drunk, old, kind of a jag-off wizard. Not even kinda. He's a scumbag. I mean, he really is. He's this legend. He's basically Gandalf, only he's a fire mage. And he explored a lot. He did a lot of good things back in the day, but in his twilight years, he's become a scumbag drunk who's kind of living large off his own legend, but no longer lives up to it because he's kind of decrepit. When you first meet him, he's living in a village. He's passed out drunk, and he basically lives in this village as their protector with his apprentice and their daughter. And he's fond of his apprentice. He's very fond of her daughter. But due to his drunken negligence and inability to perform, the village that he's in is destroyed pretty amazingly, pretty spectacularly, which was hilarious. It is not what I thought was going to happen. So I was pretty impressed. Definitely subverted my expectations. But basically, he gets portaled. His apprentice, and his daughter gets portaled out of there at the last minute by his apprentice's husband. And they end up basically in a forest where his apprentice's husband lives. While they're there, he decides to turn around his life, become a masonry guy, basically like a carpenter or contractor that fixes old temples, because there's an old temple full of treasure that's being rebuilt in this village that he gets teleported to, and he wants the stuff that's underneath it. Magic is it's enhanced by these wands, and obviously the old ones that are left in temples are like the legendary artifacts. But as you'll find out throughout the story, they can make artifacts from pretty much anything, pretty much on a whim. And the further in the story you get, the easier it is to make these things. It's kind of weird. The rules are more like guidelines for this stuff. Basically, it starts off, they're very difficult to make. They require exotic materials and a lot of practice and runes. And by the end of the story, he's literally throwing pieces of stuff at bad guys, and they're doing all the different magic. It feels like a plot hole, but there's a few, unfortunately, and we'll get to that in a minute, because at the end, he basically becomes a necromancer and kills all the bad guys, saves nobody, and becomes besties with the primary antagonist. His story has a lot of twists. Bit over the cover, the editing was good, story flow and feel were all fine. The dialogue felt a little stilted, a little generic in some spots, and I hate it when the main character just talks to themselves, says stuff out loud that's clearly for the reader, but it like nobody does that. You don't go grocery shopping and go, I better turn down this aisle in order to find the soup that I'm looking for. Ah, yes, the soup that I'm looking for. Here it is. You would be in a straitjacket because that's crazy. So it bothers me when I see it. I know it's a nitpick. I know that's just me, but that's the only part of the story flow and feel that really kind of gets to me. And that is a nitpick. That is 100% my personal preference. So take that for what you will. But let's get into the meat of it. So, like I said, the story starts off. Maris is passed out drunk in his cot in this village that they stay on. Basically, a tropical paradise, soft sand, fruity drinks. Life is good. He's a retirement. He's got his apprentice. He's teaching him, all of his old tricks and everything like that. And the idea is he's going to live out the rest of his years in a paradise. I can respect that. He gets awakened by his apprentice's daughter, which I think she's 6 or 7. It never really says how old she is, but she's definitely very young. She likes to play tag. Her mother is awful at watching her. Like, she gets into everything. At one point, she's getting a literal piggyback from a undead skeleton, and mom and dad had no idea. They're just awful parents. But anyway, she's waking Maris up. And because there was this huge earthquake and there's a tsunami coming at the island. Like, you step outside and it's a minute out. You can see it's this 300-foot tall, sheet of water coming right for him. And so the apprentice is like, Maris, are you going to do something? What should we do? Should we start evacuating? And he's like, no, I'll stop it. So he starts sorting through basically a keychain of wands. Now, it's weird because the story starts off and it shows you that in order for Maris to do magic or big magic or whatever, he needs this wand because there's this wall of water, screaming towards them. He's got less than a minute to get it knocked out, and he's sorting through a keychain of wands because he's drunk. He's got a headache a little bit. He did drink something that supposedly healed his headache, but his brain was cloudy. Bottom line is the author needed this village to get destroyed, but he does it in such a way that's actually quite extraordinary. So the wizard, just out of frustration, just picks a wand that he thinks is going to work, and he points and he fires his magic through it, and instead of stopping the wave, he turns the water into flames. Basically scours the island of life. At the last minute, the apprentice's husband, who's been paying attention and watching him this whole time, who was also an apprentice of Maris at one time, but has graduated and is now a full-blown wizard in his own right, he's watching all this because, his wife and kid are with this lunatic. And at the last minute, he's able to portal them to where he lives. I guess they're in completely different sides of the planet. So he portals him in there, but it's a weird thing that's never fully explained. Somehow his apprentice is able to utilize all the wands on Maris's keychain in order to make this portal, which to me was a huge plot hole, because if you can do that, if a weaker wizard can burn all of your wands in a moment without any notification to you at all that it's about to happen, then how are wands a threat at all? If you're in a duel or if there's a wizard you don't like and you can get line of sight to them, why don't you just burn all their wands? Like, if that's a possibility, if that's something that can be done, then wands are obsolete, because if you have them and you have an enemy that can access the wands, they can burn them out and you don't even know what's going to happen. Because Maris, who's an archwizard and is like a legend, was basically completely disarmed by his apprentice. He had 2 wands left, a little scrap of bone and a little scrap of dragon scale. And that's it. Everything else was destroyed. And he's very upset about this. Like, this is a horrible thing that you just did. He's like, well, I had to do it in order to save my family and you. And he's like, I would have rather died, which makes you think, okay, making wands is really difficult. But if they're so easily destroyed, then it doesn't make any sense. Again, it's a huge, huge plot hole. And it bothers me a lot because this story would be a lot shorter if the wizard just did those things. Because Maris did not give his apprentice access to his wands. There's no protective spell or some sort of magical, lock and key passphrase that he gave his apprentice to do these things. It just, he was able to do it. It's like carrying around a bunch of grenades and I'm able to pull the pins from 3 states away because I want to. And you have no idea it's going to happen until they've all gone off on your hip. It's a very, very weird concept. It feels like a plot hole. Anyway, the village that he was in is completely destroyed. Everybody they know is dead. It's, the apprentice and the daughter are upset for about 20 seconds and then get over it. It's a little unbelievable, but okay. Okay, the town you live in literally just got wiped off the map. And while, yes, it was going to happen due to a tsunami anyway, the people in charge that are supposed to be taking care of you made it all the more worse. Changing the tsunami into a fireball the size of Rhode Island. And 20 seconds of being upset, and they were fine. All was forgiven. Come on, let's go eat. And the daughter is skipping and is happy again. The wife is just like, okay. Maris is the only one angry, and the only reason he's upset is because all his wands are destroyed. So it's very convenient how quickly they forgive the deaths of everyone they cared about on that island. I mean, okay, sure. Maybe they were only there for a week. What do I know? You don't know how long they were on the island. So anyway, Maris is very ungrateful and is basically insufferable about being rescued. He refuses to admit that he did anything wrong. He's just a jagoff. Like, you don't like him. But I think that's the idea. I very much think that's the author's intent. You're not supposed to like this guy. He is supposed to be insufferable. And he nailed it. I mean, he really nailed it, because I don't like Maris. Like, I've read the entire story now. I don't like the guy. That being said, Maris's love for his apprentice, he does care about his apprentice, but mainly he cares about his apprentice's daughter. He really likes her a lot. He dotes on her. He's basically like the overindulgent grandfather to this little girl, and that's kind of nice. So he does have one redeeming trait. He just doesn't like to let on. So he goes over to his apprentice's husband's tower, because he lives in this city, village, basically doing what Maris was supposed to be doing on that island. And after they have a fight, because Maris is an insufferable prick, he ends up leaving. He storms out and says, "I'll be back in 5 days," because his apprentice, the wizard that saves him wife, is bound to him, like some sort of magical binding. So when he says jump, she basically has to say how high. Although, that being said, she does resist him and says she doesn't want to leave right away because he wants to leave because he doesn't want to be around the guy that burned up all his wands. But, his apprentice wants to be around her husband. And so she's like, "I don't want to leave just yet." So he's like, "I'll give you 5 days. In 5 days, though, I'm gone and you're coming with. You don't have a choice due to the magical bond." And she's pissy about it, but she goes with it because what other choice does she have? She made that deal. So Maris decides to go to the village, go to the tavern, and get drunk for the next 5 days or whatever. But he's got no money. He stole a silver knife from the guy the wizard that saved him and destroyed all his wands, his apprentice's husband, in order to pay for some drinks. But it's enough to get like a dozen beers, and then he's done. So it's just, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense what his plan was. But again, I think that's the idea. This guy is an insufferable ass. So of course he's going to do stupid drunk things. So he goes to the local tavern, pisses everyone off, and ends up passed out in the mud for 2 days outside of the tavern. That part doesn't make a whole lot of sense because all this alcoholic had was, 5 to 10 beers. Why he was literally passed out in the mud for 2 days doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but whatever, it's a small gripe, it's a small nitpick. It's just, why 2 days? Like, why did that have to occur? So basically, after he gets up, he's walking around this village, and who finds him but his apprentice's young daughter, this 6 or 7-year-old girl who's just running around this village she's never been to, as far as we know, all by herself. She's got a puppy with her. Her dad gave her a puppy, this little, like, Chihuahua puppy, basically, is the thought I get. A little brown puppy that's super annoying. The wizard doesn't like him because he keeps yapping at him and stuff because he smells. But the little girl gives him a reality check. Why do you drink so much? Do you not love me? Blah, blah, blah. And so basically he's like, you know what? I'll give up alcohol for you. And I mean it this time. And he actually does. He actually does. I didn't think he was going to pull it up, but the author went a different direction with it. And he does. He gives it up. He's still a scumbag. He still drinks occasionally, but he doesn't get knockout drunk anymore. And since he's decided that he's going to sober up and be a better person for this little girl, he decides to look for a job. And the tavern owner tells him about a masonry company that's coming to rebuild the old temple on the outskirts of the village, because of course there's an old decrepit temple at the outskirts of the village. This is a fantasy story. So I'm actually fine with that. I like the idea. And of course, Maris is like, the reason that he wants to go and become part of the masonry company isn't, because he wants to really turn over a new leaf, although that is part of it. He wants to search the catacombs of this ruined temple for old wands and stuff like that, because he knows there's stuff down there. He just doesn't know exactly where, exactly what, but he's aware of the ruins. He knows that there's a whole bunch of powerful artifacts down there, and if he can get those, then he can walk around and relive his legendary years and all that stuff. So he goes and he applies to be a mason person or whatever, and the masonry guy is like, can you even lift anything? You look like you weigh 6 pounds soaking wet. And Maris in his head is a legend, so he grabs the closest boulder, tries to pick it up, and can't. And he tells the masonry guy, you can't either, and the masonry guy walks over and picks it up with very little effort. And he's like, yeah, the weakest of us can do that, and that's a relatively light break. Go away, old man. So everyone kind of laughs at him. He leaves. He prostrates himself at the wizard's house. He gets clothes, a shower, and a black cloak, and then comes up with a scheme in order to become the masonry boss in this village instead of the masonry people who rightly turned him away. He basically goes up to the people employing the masonry company and says, hey, if I can get them to give up their contract, to tear it up publicly, will you give me the contract at half the original cost? And they go, yeah, if you can do it, absolutely. I would love to save that money. So he goes and he basically tells the masonry company, I'm going to take over the contract. I'm going to do this now. And they're like, no, we're going to do it. And he's like, no, not only are you not going to do it, but in order to placate you, I'm going to give you a third of my charge to this company, or to the village, and that's going to be enough. And for some reason it was. For some reason the masonry company said, okay, yeah, that is enough. So a third of half of what they were originally asking to be paid was somehow enough for their troubles. That is a massive, massive plot hole. So let me try to put it in perspective. They wanted $100. They were charging $100 to do this. Maris comes over and charges $50 to do it. And then they said, then he said, not only am I only going to charge him $50, but I'm giving a third of that to the masonry company, and that is going to be enough for them. So roughly less than $20 was. They wanted 100, and they took 18. Give or take. I'm rounding here. I'm not going to do crazy math, but they took $18. They wanted 100, but $18 was enough for them to walk off the job. No chance in any world. I don't care how bad this individual was at math. He understood money enough to have a masonry guild company with a ton of employees and everything like that. And he took less than half of what he originally wanted, much less than half of what he originally wanted in order to do the job. So I have a huge, huge problem with that amount of convenience in any story. So that was a huge plot hole and a huge, huge problem for me. Really didn't like that at all. So the masonry company does take it though, and they leave. They literally leave. They take nothing. They abandon all their tools, all their equipment, all their stuff. They literally just drop everything and leave, which again makes no sense at all. There's no construction company in the history of the universe that has been bought out of a contract that did not include their equipment and said, "Nope, we're gone. Everybody just grab the shirt on your back and let's leave. We're gone for $18 out of the 100 that we actually wanted because business acumen." Wow, that makes sense. So no, I have a huge problem with that. That is a huge plot hole that needs to be addressed by the author. So what Maris ends up doing, he's never done this before. He didn't know if it would work, but he didn't really care. Really, all he wanted to do was access to treasures underneath this temple. He was gonna rebuild the temple. He pinky swears, but he really just wanted access to the temple. And in order to do that, he takes the bone wand that he has, the one that was not destroyed, one of two that was not destroyed, luckily enough, and raises the dead. He goes into the village cemetery, finds the oldest skeletons in there, so nobody will freak out because they don't want to see, mom who died 2 weeks ago up, moving bricks around at the old temple. But he takes he takes the bone and he raises like 6 to 8 skeletons by splitting his soul into 6 or 8 pieces. Yep, strong Voldemort vibes from this guy. But he raises a bunch of skeletons and he goes back to the masonry thing. And it's a good thing that the masonry company left all their stuff, including their company robes. Yep, they left their company uniform behind as well. So he had something to dress the skeletons in to hide them from the villagers that may come by to see what's going on. It doesn't work, but that's what ends up happening. And so yeah, everything goes pretty well for a couple of days. They're clearing out his undead army of masonry people are cleaning out the old temple, and they're starting to get it ready for renovations and rebuilding, and everything's good for about 2 days. And then for no reason whatsoever, unless maybe they hired an accountant and they just told them how incredibly stupid they were, the masonry company comes back to the village and starts killing farmers. And I'm not just talking about 1 or 2, dozens! The construction company said, "Wait a minute, we wanted $100 and we only took 18. We're gonna murder us some people," and they do, and nobody has a problem. Like nobody on the masonry company was like, "Wow, we got swindled. Time to murder some people." So they come in and they start murdering farmers. I'm not exaggerating at all here. 30 plus dead bodies are found, hung up. They're cannibalizing them, and they're setting them up for some sort of blood sacrifice, for a blood oath thing that they're supposedly doing for the city mayor, basically the city that reigns, or the baron or whatever that reigns over this village, who lives in the city just up the hill. He's the one that sent them down here to renovate the temple because he wants to vampire souls so he can become a super powerful wizard and take over the world. Honestly, it felt more like a really shoehorned in reason to let Maris have his skeletons attack and kill people. It was kind of cool, don't get me wrong, but at the same time, it's like, this feels so forced and unnatural and just, where did this come from? Like, Toucan Sam riding into battle on Lion-O would have made more sense than the masonry company coming back and committing mass murder for blood oath sacrifices and stuff like that, and cannibalism. You don't just get hired on to become a cannibal. It's just very weird. Very weird. So Maris, though, it gives him all the reason in the world to be the knight in shining armor and be the necromancer that protects the village. So he goes in with his skeletons, and there's about a dozen of them now because he's getting better at it, and kills all of them. Just kills every single masonry murder cult employee that came back for whatever reason. And after he's done, after he's literally saved and avenged the village, he finds this carnal friggin' thing where 30 villages are not only dead and murdered, but they're strung up in some weird cultish thing. They've been eaten. One person is like strapped onto a big cross thing to be sacrificed over a fire. Like, it's really horrible. And the villagers are more upset that Maris has killed the masonry group than what they were doing to the rest of it. Like, he literally points to them because look what they were doing. Yeah, but did you have to kill all of them? Do you know who that one guy was? That was the Baron's brother or cousin or family member. He literally was killing villagers and it was like cult stuff. Look, they're eating people. Yeah, but did you try talking to him? Like, maybe we could have negotiated. It is the most ridiculous reaction to somebody rescuing a village I've ever seen in a fantasy story. Like, they're upset about it because he killed everybody that was literally eating them because one of them happened to be a family member of a baron. That's loyalty you can't buy. I'm sorry. So they know that they're in some trouble. Maris is sending a letter to the Wizards Guild, letting them know what's going on. And something important happens here that opens up a really, really big plot hole in a few pages. So they ask, the author goes out of his way to point out that Maris is sending a letter to the Wizards Tower, letting him know what happened. And his apprentice and the other wizard in the city is like, why? Why don't you just, telepathically link to them and let them know what's going on? And very like condescending, it's like, because if I did that, if I linked with them telepathically, they could read my mind, and I don't want them knowing everything that's happening here. And the wizard is like, what are you talking about? And his apprentice is like, he doesn't want them to know that he's a necromancer now, because while there's no rule against it, it's frowned upon. Like farting in public. It's not that it's illegal to do it, but it's not the best manners. So okay, sure, I can get there 100%, but pay attention to that. He did not want to telepathically link to the Wizard's Tower, because if he did so, they could read his mind. Remember that, because in a minute it's going to be important. So they start plotting. The village leader is there. The wizard leader for that village is there. His old apprentice. His apprentice is there. Of course, their daughter is there because she's always around whenever there's anything going on. Like, this girl has no boundaries. 6 years old. Come on, let me show you. Let me show you all this dead stuff. Let's talk about murder and war and everything. Sure, she's gonna grow up just fine. Don't worry, she doesn't grow up. Anyway. Yes, even the puppy is there. So while they're in this, I don't know, this building discussing what their next moves are, what they're going to do, a portal opens up. A couple of portals open up right in front of them, and out steps this demigod, super powerful wizard, basically Mars's equal in power, strength, and just arrogance. And he's like, what's going on? And they're like, oh, what are you doing here? You must be the one that they're doing the blood oath for. And he's like, yes, I must be. And he's like, where is Paul? We must speak with him. Paul's dead. Oh, pity. And I'm not exaggerating. That's literally what's basically said. And yes, I am paraphrasing. So I guess literally isn't the correct term, but it's what's said. So the wizard nonchalantly reaches into his robe to pull out his gat to kill everybody. And Maris is like, you fools, he's going to kill us. That is literal. That is an actual line in the book. And he starts attacking the wizard. Long story short, Maris has had a couple of undead hanging in the ceiling rafters this whole time. His apprentice gets killed, his apprentice's husband gets killed, his apprentice's daughter's dog gets killed, the elder leader of the village is killed, before Maris finally, and Maris is fighting the wizard, right? But the whole time, there's two skeletons hanging above this wizard in the ceiling rafters, waiting for him to give the command to drop down on him. And that's how he ends up finally taking him down. The two skeletons drop down on the enemy wizard, start stabbing him with chisels and knives, and while he's distracted by being stabbed to death, Maris is able to put a firebolt through him. They call it fireballs, but fireballs explode. These are fire bolts. And he puts a firebolt through his chest cavity, killing the evil wizard. Well, the daughter of his apprentice, the little girl that he cares about more than anyone else on the planet, she's stuck unconscious underneath the body of the village elder that was killed by this powerful wizard. Keep in mind, everyone's dead here, including the puppy, with the exception of the little girl who he cares about more than anything. So he turns around, and during the fight, he realized that through that other portal, another enemy wizard, Liara, a powerful wizard, who's in armor that is mirrored to reflect magical spells and can stop cannonballs from hurting her. Again, keep that in mind. It's important. She comes in, she's literally surrounded by a cone of flame, which is an amazingly cool visual, by the way. And she's like, you killed them all. And she's got a bunch of crossbow soldiers with her who take aim at Morris. Morris, who's over by the little girl checking on her, seeing that she's alive and still breathing, could pull her out from under there, would not be difficult. Realizes what's about to happen, runs over to the little girl's dead father, pulls his keychain of wands off of him, and uses it to create a portal so he can escape. Yeah, he left the little girl behind. Morris is a butthead. So he escapes. He runs, he goes to his dead wizard buddies or ex-buddies tower trying to find wands or anything that could help him out, and he finds nothing. The soldiers are showing up, so he runs off into the forest and hides there. The enemy wizard Liaris leaves him to his own devices while she takes over the village. And by takes over the village, I mean slaughters everyone. A handful of people survive, but don't get attached. They're not going to be around much longer. So he runs into the forest, hiding, and the next day he decides to take his revenge. He needs to save the little girl that he abandoned and all that stuff. So he's splitting his soul into more and more pieces to raise more and more undead. It hurts, and it supposedly makes it so that he loses like his memories and has trouble tracking things. He basically gets dementia. But again, there's a plot hole here because it doesn't actually do anything. Like, he forgets some things. He starts writing notes down on leaves and bark, but it doesn't come into play at all. Like, he remembers everything. At no point does he forget where he's at or anything like that during the fighting and everything that comes up. It's just, why put that into the story if it's not going to come back later on? It makes no sense at all. And why put a problem with that, like some sort of negative side effect that actually doesn't inhibit him from doing anything? Like, he's literally tearing his soul into pieces to animate these undead. And just like any other muscle, apparently the more often he does it, the better he becomes at it. It's very weird. And also, as he's doing it, he learns new abilities through doing it. It feels a little forced. It feels a little Rey Skywalker, or Palpatine, I guess. But you know what I mean? It feels a little too convenient. Little Mary Sue or Marty Sue in this situation. So anyway, while he's doing all this, the village population is being wiped out by the enemy wizard. Liara literally eats souls of people in order to become more powerful. And she's doing this whole time that Morris is raising the dead. So why she isn't a god by now, by the time she's done eating the village, I guess the villagers' souls are weaker. I guess NPCs got an NPC. And so she's super powerful in her own right. She's eating all these villagers. Like, she's so powerful when he first meets her, he has to run away from her because he can't fight her. But when he sees her later, like, she's not any more powerful than she was before. If anything, she's weaker. Like, he's equal to her now. It's very weird. But anyway, he's doing these little like guerrilla tactics where he's attacking the soldiers and the militiamen inside the village, killing a handful of them, taking some prisoners, and using their dead. And he raises up a bigger army. It goes from like 6 to 8 to 12 to 20. Eventually, he has 45 skeletons under his control, and he's got armor on them, and he's got weapons on them from the people that he's killed, I assume. And so he develops this plan. He decides that he needs to get in there to save the little girl before it's too late. Spoiler, it's way too late. And so he develops this plan to trick Liara into basically setting her army of 300 soldiers or militiamen or whatever they are, because it does change throughout the story whether or not they're soldiers or militia. It seems to fluctuate. Anyway, he sets up this elaborate plan to trick her, to sending her army out into a middle of a field so that he can ambush them. And it's risky, but you don't really know why it's risky. It's like, I haven't done it in a while. If I don't do it right, my head could implode. Well, with all the plot armor he's surrounded in, at no point did I ever have any worries that it wasn't going to work. And of course it does. But there's a huge problem with this. Mars allows Liara to telepathically link with him, which, if you remember earlier, was a problem because if you did that, you could read the wizard's mind. If you're going to tell me that you can't do something because you don't want people to find out what your plans are, and then let your enemy do that thing, which would allow them to figure out what your plans are, it makes no sense. This is the biggest plot hole in the story, in my opinion, and this is where the story really starts going downhill. So the trap was basically he had his skeletons put a whole bunch of other skeletons, like a few hundred skeletons, up on these posts in the middle of this field to basically make it look like he's got a bunch of rank and file undead soldiers in this field that are getting ready to attack him. He allows Liara to see that through his eyes when they're telepathically linked. But here's the thing. She's the one that telepathically contacted him, not the other way around. Number one, the minute she did that, she should have been able to read his thoughts in order to discover what his plan was, what the trap was, therefore never falling for it. So his plan was fundamentally flawed. Now, given the fact that splitting his soul into so many pieces, 45 at this point, is supposed to make him basically have raging dementia, I could have gotten there. I'd be like, okay, he forgot. That makes sense. That's where this side effect, this problem is going to kick in, and the story's going to get good. No. Plot armor was a lot stronger than good storytelling. And that's what happened. She falls for it, hook, line, and sinker, because he allows her to see where his army's at. It takes her a little under an hour to get her soldiers over there, which is ridiculous because anybody would tell you, well, you told him that you knew where they were, he's gonna move. Like, why? And if he is still there, why would you fall for that? Why would you think that's a good idea? How could you not see that? The only thing that would have made it more obvious is if he put a sign up that said, obvious trap. So she goes, sends her whole army over there, and of course they attack the undead that are there, but they're not animated. They're just put up on posts. When they blow up when they destroy the skeletons that are on posts, he's cursed them to explode into dust, creating a fog. That was his big thing. It was a fog. Then his 45 undead skeletons, are able to literally Naruto run through 300 plus useless militiamen. Whether they're soldiers or militiamen doesn't matter. They just run through them through this fog that they can see through for some reason, but the militiamen can't. And the left flank goes, then the center mass goes, and then he gets past all of them in order to access the temple where he believes Liara was at, because he wants to get a hold of the stuff before she does, and he wants to try to rescue the little girl who he still stupidly thinks is alive. He gets to the temple unmolested, because of course he does, and when he gets there, he realizes he's too late. Liara has literally ate all the souls of the villagers that were there, including the little girl. Everyone is dead. While he's there and he's all upset and doing his "I will avenge you, people," the militia attack. They come up behind him in super stealth plate armor and start shooting crossbow bolts at him and stuff. And it's kind of a cool fight scene. I will give it that. It was a very cool little fight scene in these cramped quarters and stuff like that. There's a bunch of bone walls that come up. There's fireballs. Well, they're fire bolts. They're not fireballs. But they're fire bolts that are blowing up skeletons or immolating skeletons left, right, and center. But Liara should be a demigod by now. With all the souls that she's swallowed and all the abilities she's got, she should be able to walk right through Morris. And I don't understand what the big threat was, because he was like, she eats souls in order to increase her power. She's eaten a village worth of souls. How is she not literally walking on water and just eating alive Morris and all of his stupid little skeletons? It doesn't make any sense, because Morris so far has not been shown to be super powerful at all. In fact, he's kind of making it up as he goes along the entire time. Also, there's no side effects from his alcoholism, like no shakes, no issues, no irritability or anything like that. And there's no side effects from his memory loss from splitting his soul into 45 plus different pieces. It's just all the side effects, all the detriments to his actions, there's no consequences whatsoever. And consequences are what make a story interesting like this. Think of Wheel of Time, for example. If you're familiar with that, male wizards don't cast spells for very long, because their side of magic is tainted and eventually makes them go crazy. And that's the greatest part about that, is because every time the male wizard protagonist in the story, Rand, uses magic, he gets a little bit crazier. And as you progress throughout the book, you follow in that. You go with him on his descent into madness and how it affects him and everything like that. That is how you storytell. That is what I'm talking about. The author here, he created something similar. He created a mechanic to do exactly that, but there's no follow through. There's no consequence. Maris never has any consequences to his actions. Nothing that lasts. He gets embarrassed, he gets upset, he gets ridiculed a little bit, but his memory loss never affects anything. His alcoholism never affects anything. No shaking, no forgetting what the spell was, no forgetting what the plan was, no forgetting what certain abilities were. Nothing bad happens to him. And that is what I'm talking about when I'm talking about plot armor and plot holes and all that other stuff, because they could literally walk into a volcano that's going off and bathe in the molten magma that's coming out of it in their small clothes and walk out of it clean. And that kills the story for the reader, because you figure out really, really quick that no matter what they do, nothing's going to stick. There's never going to be an issue. In fact, let me get to that in just a minute, just to show how protected and how zero consequences there were for Morris. We're going to get to that in just a second. Liara summons a fire elemental, and it kills Maris. It kills him. But due to plot armor, since Maris was splitting his soul into dozens of skeletons, he's not dead. And he comes back to life without issue, which is really, really confusing, because the skeletons, when the skeletons die or are defeated, the part of his soul inside of that skeleton comes rushing back into him, and it feels like he's getting punched in the heart. It hurts, but that's what happens. So if that worked universally throughout all of them, when he died, then shouldn't his soul just have gone into all the other skeletons or something like that? Or maybe just the next one? I could have gotten there. But the fact that no. In fact, there's no consequence to death for Maris. He just comes back. He literally comes back. And to make matters worse, he was blown up by a fire elemental. So he was horribly disfigured, right? Burns, missing limbs, all this stuff. However, he found a healing potion in his dead apprentice's husband's tower during his little forays into the village doing his guerrilla tactics. The potion was affected by the fire elemental, but the glass didn't shatter, nothing broke it or anything like that, but the contents inside were boiling. That's in the book. He drinks the boiling health potion and it restores him completely. Not only is he still alive, but he's not even disfigured by getting blown up by a fire elemental. And this is what I'm talking about. There's zero consequences to the actions of this character. This isn't a story. This is a fairy tale. This is one of those things where he's God. Maris is God. He can't be defeated. He can't be hurt. Not even death is permanent to him. He doesn't even have a scar. Okay? Nothing bad happens to this guy. It happens to everyone around him, but he is infallible. He cannot be harmed. He's immortal. He's invincible. He's God. And that's boring. A God character is a boring character. And that's the biggest problem with this story. The author set up all the mechanics to make an amazingly cool story with a lot of pitfalls and a lot of adversity for Maris to overcome. Alcoholism, wand usage, magic, a fallen legend, trying to get into their good graces, trying to restore their faith, his friends' faith in them. And he fails at all of it, and there's zero consequences. There's zero repercussions. So anyway, he kills Liara. He's able to do it very, very easily because she's upset. She's exhausted. Like, there's consequences for her. All of this magic and all this fighting has exhausted her. She's literally throwing up. She's so exhausted. But Maris stands up, fires some bone knuckle missiles at her, and kills her. Like, no problem. Puts one right through her heart. But when you first meet Liara, when she's first introduced into the story, she's wearing armor that is literally said that it can reflect spells away from her and is strong enough to deflect cannonball fire. But a bone missile parts it like it's tissue paper. I honestly, it felt like the author forgot she was wearing armor because it's never mentioned again. And if you're gonna tell me she wasn't wearing it when she was gonna go into battle with Maris the God, then that is a massive plot hole and an unacceptable excuse for what happened. It's yada yada yada. The end fight, as cool as it was, and I will give it 100% that, it was very cool. It was yada yada yada, and it was way too convenient to weigh it all reconciled in the end. And it's really too bad. It's really too bad because the potential is there. It just was not executed well at all. So now we get to the end of the story. Maris is the only one that lived. Everyone in the village, including his friends, including the little girl, even the puppy, dies. And he raises them. He raises up his masonry group, uses them all to fix the village up. Not only does he fix it up, but it's like the pinnacle. It's this crown jewel in the middle of this I don't know, the land that they live in. I'm not sure if it's an island or a continent or what, but he fixes up the temple. He fixes up the dead village elders, village leaders' mansion, turns it into a guest house, fixes up the inn where he stays, fixes up the tower. Like, I don't know where he gets the materials to do all this, but I'm sure he found it in a crate somewhere. There's a lot of stuff in that ruined temple. I'm sure they had enough to rebuild the entire village to the statehood of elegance that it was in. But he does all that. The whole village is great. The roads are now made out of marble. Yep, marble. That's in the book. It went from dirt roads to marble cobblestones. Yeah, I don't know where he got the materials for any of this, but yeah, he gets that all set up. People are coming. It's now this big, tourist attraction that people come there and check out. Some farmers that fled into the mountains come back down and hang out there and are going to start trying to make a go of it again. But Samuel, who was the lord of the city that sent the masonry team down there to cannibalize and blood oath and cultist his way through everybody, basically sent those, and was also the one that sent those two evil wizards that killed everyone, including the people that Maris supposedly cared about, waltzes into the city all by himself. No guards. He's got plate armor on and a purple cape. That's it. No guards, no retainers, nothing. And he walks over, he trots over on his horse, and he meets with Maris, no problem. And Maris is like, who are you? And he goes, I'm Samuel, Lord of the East City or whatever. And Maris knows who he is. He's like, oh my God, you're the guy that killed everyone I cared about and sent those wizards and murdered everyone here. And Samuel goes, yup, but now I need to hire you to rebuild my city because a dragon attacked it. And Maris goes, after giving him a very stern look and considering killing him, because, oh yeah, he's got wands and potions and Commodore 64s. He probably has an Xbox Series X and a PlayStation 5. Maris could just get anything. And accepts Samuel's proposal to rebuild the city because he's interested to see a dragon. How cool is that? There's a dragon here somewhere. And Samuel's like, I know we've had our differences, but bygones can be bygones. Let us join forces to build a better future for tomorrow. And they mouth kiss, hug, and they all lived happily ever after. I wish I was exaggerating. So in the end, I ended up giving this story 3 out of 5 stars. I when I first started reading the story, right up until the part where the masonry company that he paid off to leave left or came back and started killing everybody without any real, that's where the turning point in the story was, because up to that point this was a 5 out of 5 star story to me. It was really good. I was enjoying it. It was kind of refreshing after all the science fiction. It was kind of neat to see a fantasy story. I still don't think it belongs in this story at all, or in this, I'm sorry, it doesn't belong in this book at all. It just doesn't fit. But it was really good right up until then, and it took such a 90-degree turn. I was not ready for it, and then it just kept on turning until it 180'd out of the 5 star. I don't think it's a bad story. I don't think it's awful. It definitely needs some work. For everything that I disliked about it, there was something I liked about it. I really enjoyed the idea of how magic worked here. I liked the wand usage. I liked the keychain thing where it was like, damn it, which wand? I thought that was really clever. I hated the execution because it's forgotten. There's just a lot that's just forgotten. The rules of this story are forgotten by the author constantly. And the lack of repercussions, the lack of any consequence for anything that he does is just disgusting. It's the wrong message, and it just makes the story unfun. And it's hard to suspend your disbelief for that. So all in all, I don't think it's a bad story, but I don't think it's a good story. I think it's right there in the middle on average, and that's where I'm going to stay. But this is just one guy's opinion. Please, please click on the link in the description below, get a copy of this book, flip to the back, page 125, and read the 75-page novella, short story, whatever you want to call it, and let me know what you think. Was I right? Was I wrong? Was I somewhere in between? Love to have a conversation about it. And that's it. Another book review is in the history books. As always, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or complaints, feel free to put them in the comment section below, and I will get back to you as quick as I can. And as always, thanks.